This is Jed Distler. I'm the artistic director for Salon Concerts at Klavierhaus, a series that was started 2 years ago by the late Joseph Patrych in order to provide an inclusive environment and expressive forum for pianists of all generations. On May 5th, 2024, a multitude of luminaries from the piano world gathered to pay tribute to Joe Patrych and to celebrate his life in a musical marathon lasting for, around 5 hours, maybe a little more than that, I think. The concert was the brainchild of three of Joe's longtime friends and colleagues: Mark N. Grant, who served as the MC for the occasion, John Samuels, and Ronn Yedidia. This event was co-produced by New York Piano Academy and Muminir. We're now presenting this event as a series of live streams, and this is our second of four installments. Enjoy the music and the memories.
Okay, we're going to continue with Nadezhda Vleva, who is going to play another one of our evening's elegy titles, although this is her own composition. She writes, "We go up and down like on a Ferris wheel through rainbows of emotions, forgetting that what is here today is transient and may vanish in an instant. Lament is about loss of things, undervalued experiences, and dear people that were taken away from us way too soon." Nadezhda. Seth Winter is another fine audio engineer and restorer of old recordings. He was an old friend of Joe's, and I've known him for many years too. And he's worked at the Lincoln Center Library for many, many years. Seth, we're interested in hearing your reminiscences. Please join.
Can you hear me? Good. I want a show of hands. How many of you had the experience of being a passenger in Joe's car when he was driving? And I hear a few little laughs all over the place. Yeah, I had that experience. I always felt that when he got into the car, he put the car in drive and it became what's my lane, concerning the way he did things. Walter Winterfeld, who couldn't be here, told me a story one time, and it happened with some other people. In one hand, he had a shake. Another hand, he had a cell phone. And he was using his stomach with the steering wheel. And Walter grabbed over and put his hand on the wheel and said, "Joe, do you need a hand?" Joe and I met in 1978 at a Michael Lewin concert, if I remember correctly, at Alice Tully Hall at that time. And we immediately became friends. And the funny thing is, we were also both in different professions, but it went into music. He started dealing with pianos and live material. I started dealing with historic material, earlier material, discs, lacquers, early tape. And we immediately felt like brothers because we were around the same age and we had this interest. But what astounded Joe was when he came to my house for the first time, he met my father, who was a pupil of a teacher by the name of Rose Raymer, who I think was a Leshetitsky pupil. You have to keep in mind, my father was born in 1913. And he was absolutely starstruck when my father told him, "Oh yeah, Rose Raymer used to take us to recitals." He said, "I saw Rachmaninoff, I saw Rosenthal in concert." That just absolutely astounded Joe, because here were two legends he collected, and he met someone who actually witnessed them in performance. As the years went by, of course, we branched out, and I picked up doing things in the Windows realm of restoration, in the sense of a Cedar and Sadie system. He went with Sonic Solutions, which is a Macintosh-based system. And I remember something about some musician coming to him who had worked with Carl Seltzer, who was U.B. Blake's engineer. And this gentleman refused to go to digital editing. He was still doing stuff on analog tape. The man died. This woman came to Joe and he showed her how he can edit. And she said, "You know, doing stuff on reel-to-reel tape is like doing brain surgery with a shovel in comparison to what digital can do today." And he also once said to me too, once we started doing everything in the digital domain, he said, "Don't you miss the wow, the flutter, the hiss, the pitch instability in the recordings?" I said, "Nope. I'm very happy we're in the digital domain now." I also remember one other thing about Joe. We were always on the phone talking. When he was coming back from a gig or when he was ready to leave, or I would call him, and we'd always talk about things, personal things going on in our lives, music and everything, and we always barbed about certain jokes. But one of the greatest things you may have witnessed too is like, all right, he had to be at my house at a certain time, say 4 o'clock. 3:45 would come, I'd call him on his cell phone. "Joe, where are you?" "I'm in the car." "Where in the car?" "Behind the steering wheel." That meant only one thing. He had just gotten in the car, he was going down Webster Avenue to his favorite Carvel to get a sundae before he got on the road to come to me. We knew each other over 45 years. I saw him just before Thanksgiving, and I knew something was wrong with him. And I had also been there in the hospital in August when he had the stent put in. And something gave me a chill because I never saw him sick before in my life. But something bothered me when I saw him, and he didn't tell me what was going on. And then the inevitable had happened. But I will tell you, he always had a great idea about certain jokes that we would go back and forth, and I can tell you two of the cleanest ones I could say here without offending anybody. The first one has to deal with an old Jewish man crossing the street, and all of a sudden he collapses. A crowd ensues. A cop comes over and he says, "Sir, are you comfortable?" And the answer is, "I make a living." The other one was another one, the same Jewish man a few weeks later. He's in a crowd, gentleman is crossing the street, also collapses. Cop comes over. He knows already from being on the beat this person's not going to make it to the hospital. So he bends over, he said, "Sir, is there anything I can do for you?" He said, "Yes, I'm a Catholic." So he yells into the crowd, "Is there anybody here who could administer the last rites?" Little Jewish man picks up his hand and says, "I can do it." "You? Don't make fun of me." Because Joe also had a great way of doing the Yiddish accent because of his parents. "Don't make fun of me. I lived behind the church for 45 years. And I know the service. I heard it every Sunday." He says, "All right, go ahead." The old man bends down and goes, "B45, G36, N54. But that, ooh, you're a tough one there, Eisler. But Joe was like a brother to me. We were through thick and thin. We were there for each of our brothers when they passed away and our parents. And I really miss him because his knowledge of electronics and digital end of things, when I needed new converters, building my studio when I went from Brooklyn to Long Island, he was there setting everything up for me. He knew what he was doing. I'd always call him and ask him what to do. I'm going to miss him for that. And I just want to say I was one of the few that was privileged that I got into the hospital when he got sick, before the curfew went down that some of you know about, and that's the reason why we're all here. And all I could say is we used to do a routine. We'd come up to each other and we'd go like this, and walk away. I wish I could have done that with that last time in the hospital. And I was only there for a few minutes before I had to leave, and I just looked at him and I said, "Take care, Joe. I hope you're doing okay up there. Thank you." We are finally getting to one of the kings of the parody, the great Alan Sherman. And the one we're going to do, it's from Alan in Wonderland, from Warner Brothers. I think it's 1964. It is one of the most clever things you have ever heard. It's Night and Day of Cole Porter with punctuation marks.
Punctuation marks, right. We'll have a couple of other selections of his. But for now, and obviously he must have gotten this idea from Victor Borge, which is much earlier.
There was a very famous piece by David Rose, who was a movie and television orchestrator and conductor. He wrote something called Holiday for Strings.
States.
No. Alan Sherman wrote Holiday for States.
Ah.
The original song was Holiday for Strings. And with Lou Bush and the chorus setup, he's another one where he names every one of the states.
But it's not as funny as this one.
Oh no, this is the king of them all. Alan Sherman picked it up from the same album we just saw from 1965. And what makes this even funnier is the fact that he has the audience helping him along to participate in it. And, well, what a way to end the program.
Kiss of Meyer. In spite of all the great lyrics, to me personally, the funniest line in any song I've ever heard is, "I got a letter from the state there, you're gonna need a license plate there." That is brilliant. The brilliance of Alan Sherman and Tom Lehrer and all these other people that make musical comedy what it is.
The joy of making people laugh. Yes. All right, and thank you, Joe, as always. Right. That's our handshake. So, thanks again.
Thank you. And have a good night.
Azalea Kelly comes from a very musical family. Her mother, Emily White, is a fine pianist and a very intelligent writer on music and has played the most difficult pieces by Shimanovsky and all sorts of other repertoire. Azalea's brother is a baritone, Bugs, and she is a natural Chopinist. I've heard her play. She's going to play the Chopin Etude Opus 10, number 4, in C sharp minor. Azalia.
Before I play, I just want to say a few things. I need to tell a little Joe anecdote. It's Joe and also his cat. I grew up with Joe, basically. I recorded my first, was it a video, Mom, or was it an audio? When I was like 8? It was a video. It was my audition for the master class I ended up getting into with Pascal Roger, and I had the best time and would not have done it without Joe, so thank you, Joe. I'm 99% sure it was this piece I'm about to play that I was recording when, in between takes, I opened the door of the studio to get some water or something. And the cat, Sweetie, ran into the recording studio, which we all know that Joe hated when his cats did that. Sweetie, instead of coming out when Joe bribed him with treats, walked under the piano and sat there and wouldn't come out. So I had to sit down and play, I think either the next 1 take or 2 takes with a cat right there under my feet. So, yeah, if we can get a hold of that recording, and it sounds a little bit like I'm trying not to laugh, it's because there's a cat sitting right there. But now there's no cat, and sadly there's no Joe, but he's watching us, and he is wishing me good luck playing this etude and telling me not to miss any notes.
With a backstory like that, I was surprised she didn't play Kitten on the keys. But that was a fine performance. We now have a very unusual person, a young person who Joe thought very, very highly of. Sophia Liu is only 15 years old, but she is already the owner of many prodigious accomplishments, accent on the prodigy in the literal sense. She's played all over the world. She composes And she's written a piece in Joe's memory, Nocturne in C major for Joe, and she wants to speak a word or two about it, I believe. So where are you, Sophie?
Hi, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking all the organizers of this event for giving us all the chance to commemorate our beloved Joe. I met Joe when I was about 9 years old at a festival, and he has always been a huge fan of my playing. And I actually live in Montreal, Canada, but I come to New York City very often, and we would get together every time I came. And not only was he very dear to me, but he was also a great friend of my family. Today, I'd like to share this original piece. It's about 3 to 4 minutes long, and I think this piece reflects the joyful memories that we shared, of course, the sadness of his passing, and also some conversations or dialogues between me and him in heaven. I think that music is universal, and he's still part of our universe. Thank you.
Welcome to a special Monday evening version of Sunday Evenings at Clavier House. Tonight we have the New York recital debut of Sophia Liu, 13-year-old pianist. The program, Omnibus Opus 2 by Alcon, Beethoven Third Piano Sonata Opus 2 Number 3, Liszt Spanish Rhapsody, Valkyrie of Islame, Chopin Third Ballade Opus 47, and Chopin Variations on La Cita in La Mano Opus 2. Sophia Liu. Well, thank you for coming, and for those who watch it online. And just think that 25 years from now, you're going to be able to say that you saw this pianist play when she was 13 years old, when she is on the major stages, in my opinion, which she will be. So, glad you were here, glad you enjoyed it. Have a good night.
I'm going to let the next piece be introduced by the blood relation of the performers. Aidan and Bryce Yedidia are twins, and they're going to play their father's piece, Lullaby, but I think he wants to say something about that first. I don't know where he is. Ron? Oh, there he is.
Okay. Yeah, I've known Joe for about 42 years, and just for the next segment, I would like to focus on the aspect of the child in Joe. I don't know how much you have seen it, noticed it, felt it. Joe was a child, and a very funny child, and a very mischievous one, too. And he had a way with children that was extremely special. And we've learned about it over the last 26 years since we started having children, myself and my wife, Fiona. We have 4 of them, Orion, 26, Alex, 23, and twins that are now 13 years old. And Joe always loved playing with children, like a child. And in recent years, when the twins grew, Aidan and Bryce, he loved stopping by and playing basketball with them. Now, I hope you won't take offense for it, but the language in which the two sides were holding the conversation, to say obscene or, swearing or cursing was like pretty much the way about it. So he would call me and say,
So how are the shits? Can I come play some basketball with them?
and I would say the shits are fine. They're asking how is the, and I don't want to say what. And that was the way, that was the kind of exchange, which was amazing. He was coming by and they were playing, and they loved each other in a very, very spicy way, shall I say. And I mean, when he passed away, of course, it took us all by a shock. And it was amazing how the twins responded, which again, I'm not going to say what they said, but they said exactly what Joe would have loved them to say. But how dare that leave us like that? They were so indignant about it. Anyway, the lullaby that I composed in 1995 was a lament in the memory of my grandmother and one of Israel's greatest composers, Sasha Argov, and it was first recorded in Joe's studio in the form of cello and piano. The cellist then was David Egger. And Aidan and Bryce are going to play tonight as a lament in the memory of Joe.
Hello, I'm Bryce, and I just wanted to say that I really loved Joe. He was super funny. The first time I met him, of course, as my dad said, we may or may not have cursed at each other a lot, but his sense of humor kind of exactly matched both Aiden and I's, and he was really just like a great guy, and he also loved to curse. And I remember that he would come and he would always play basketball with us. And I remember our 4th of July parties that we'd have at our house. And he'd come and, like my dad said, he'd say, "Where are the shits?" And he'd basically challenge us to play basketball, and we'd respond by basically calling him like an asshole. But I really love him, and I think for all of us, we hope that he's doing great wherever he is now. And I hope that he heard all of the performances so far. Well, I know he did, and all of the ones to come. Yeah.
Okay, so he basically covered it, but yeah, I love Joe. Our relationship didn't have a variety of words, but the stuff that we said to each other carried quite a lot of power, I guess. Yeah, it was not something you'd usually hear someone say to someone my age, or something someone my age would say to someone that they should probably respect. But Joe, I mean, yeah, he could, in my words, be an asshole. And yeah, I really enjoyed cursing at him for multiple years. So thank you for listening, and I love you, Joe.
We have Sharon Chang, who is going to play Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G major, Opus 32, number 5. She's played at Clavier House and has quite an extensive repertoire. And Sharon.
So I don't know Joe as long as some of you, or most of you, but the first time I heard his name was through a composer friend whose work I was supposed to perform at his house. Actually, the composer is here today also. So when the composer friend mentioned to me that Joe was going to be at the house concert and the breakfast next day, he described him as prominent, and he told me all kinds of things that Joe did. And so I thought this person was going to be like a celebrity. So I thought, well, I'm a nobody, so he's whatever. But I was so surprised when I met him at the house concert. He was late. He actually missed the whole performance. But anyway, he came at the end for the reception, and but he was just so nice and making jokes and so easy to get along with. And that was 6 years ago, and I mean, we weren't always friends. The first 2 years we weren't really talking, but then we reconnected after that, and we became really good friends towards the end. And I have to say, I really miss him. So I'm doing this in memory of Joe. I hope he's here somewhere. Thank you.
We have another spoken tribute at this point. I don't want to forget him. Donald Eisler is another very old friend of, an old friend, not a very old person, of Joe, and I'm sure he has many touching reminiscences for us. Donald.
Joe was a close friend for 45 years, and I miss him every day. But when I think of him, I always grin. He was so positive and so fun. This is an article I wrote shortly after he passed away. It's called Joe Patrych from the Bronx. Our friend Joe was born and spent the first year of his life in Manhattan. The following year, his parents purchased the three-family house on Teabout Avenue in the Bronx that many of us knew so well. Originally, the Patrych family and his mother's mother, his only grandparent to survive the Holocaust, lived on the top floor. Later, they moved to the second floor. Still later, Joe moved back upstairs and used that top floor apartment for his studio and living space. But in the early years when I first knew him, the late 70s and into the 80s, he lived with his parents on the second floor. And my first recording of music of Walter Schnabel was made in his original studio, i.e. his parents' living room. Joe also had medical and scientific interests, and for many years worked in the urinalysis lab at Montefiore Hospital. Though he phased that job out as he got more involved in music, he actually put in enough years to be eligible for, and may have already been receiving a pension for his time there. He often worked the night shift, which gave him the rest of the day to pursue his other interests. In those days before cell phones, Joe used his free time, the night shift was not as busy as the day shifts, to make liberal use of the hospital's phones to stay in touch with his friends. I once suggested that once he left Montefiore, they would be able to lower the daily rates for inpatients as the phones wouldn't be used as much. Joe's ability to manage with little sleep always impressed me. In the early days when I knew him, I lived on the Upper West Side and usually had dinner around 10 p.m. at Tom's restaurant in the neighborhood. One of the friends who joined me there often was Joe. On a late evening, he was telling me about his many activities all over the city that day. Knowing he was an early riser, I asked when he had gotten up that morning. He paused to think about this and then said, "I worked at the hospital all night." There is a brashness, by which I mean a freshness and uninhibited style, not a meanness, which is characteristic of some of us from the only borough of New York City, which is on the North American mainland. The rest of the city is made up of islands and parts of an island, for people who don't know that. Certainly this could be said of Joe. He was outgoing, honest, open-minded, and up for discussion of any subject. By contrast, much has been written of traumas suffered by children of Holocaust survivors, though the children themselves did not have these experiences. Joe's parents were Polish Jews who lived through World War II in Europe. As he said, "My mother grew up in a concentration camp." His father, already a young man when the war started, fled east to Siberia and spent the war years there. This was no pleasure, but it was a safer place for a Jew than German-occupied Poland. Perhaps as a result of these experiences, his parents, who were already retired when I knew them and were always very kind to me, his mother often volunteering to make me a sandwich, preferred a quiet life at home for themselves, as opposed to the lifestyle of their lively, ambitious, and energetic son, who never sat still except perhaps when editing recordings. Joe was a quick study. Indeed, listening recently to a 1979 interview he and Bruce Posner did with pianist Robert Goldsand for their long-running radio program, Concert Grand, which was recorded at Fordham University in the Bronx, I'm impressed with how much the not yet 24-year-old Joe knew about music and performers. He had only become a serious convert to classical music a few years earlier, after which he spent lots of time at concerts and buying records. I got some insight into this quick study aspect of him once when his parents told me a story of a summer vacation they took in the Catskills when Joe was little. They noticed that after his father read a children's book to him, he was able to read it back to them, turning the pages at just the right time, though he hadn't yet learned to read. One of my favorite stories of Joe's Bronx-centeredness was when I asked him which route he traveled home from a visit to Rockland County. Joe said he took the Deegan. The Deegan, I asked? Yes, the Deegan, he said. For those who don't know this matter of New York geography, the New York Thruway, which goes from the border of New York City north to Albany and then west to Buffalo, emerges from the Bronx, where it is known as the Major Deegan Expressway. But to Bronx-oriented Joe, who was also naturally a big Yankees fan, the name of the entire road was the Deegan. Thank you.
I missed reading a message from someone who has a lot of meaning to this community, Solomon Akowski, who himself recently passed away on March 15th, the great teacher and icon of Manhattan School of Music. This is what he had to write about Joe after Joe's passing a few months before his own. Joe Patrych and I had been close friends since we met at his studio decades ago and then had dinner in a restaurant nearby in order to continue our conversation. We soon found out that we had similar tastes on pianists and even agreed on who our favorite pianist was. You know who that was? Since then, we spoke on the phone almost daily. He was a master at promising the impossible. It will be ready tonight. And then finding very imaginative excuses for not delivering. I have never screamed at anyone as much and as loud how boring life is without him. He updated me on the vicissitudes of the piano world without me having to research it. He knew everyone worth knowing, and everyone wanted to share secrets and gossip with him. He shared many with me. Joe was unique. I miss him so much. I think that's especially touching in light of the fact that he has passed. We're going to take a break soon, very soon, but it will be a short break. First, I want to get another family affair going here with Ronn Yedidia. Well, not a family affair, but a school affair. His student, Philip Thompson, will play the two movements from Bach's C minor partita, the second partita, the Sarabande and the Rondo. Ron, do you want to say anything about Philip? I don't know.
Yeah, Joe was a great supporter of the students of the New York Piano Academy, which resides right here. But our relationship with him started in the mid-90s already, and he was instrumental of making recordings and videotapes, and as well as giving terrific advice to some of our most distinguished students. And the list is long. The very last student of ours that worked with Joe, that Joe absolutely adored, was Philip Thompson. And it was just natural that we choose Philip to be the representative of the students of our academy to play tonight.
the next performer, Jimmy Roberts, is a composer of two famous musicals, I Love You, You're Perfect, Now Change, and The Velveteen Rabbit, and many other musicals as well. He's a wonderful songwriter. He's a master cabaretist, all-around entertainer. He's classically trained by Constance Keene and mentored by Peter Nero. And he is going to sing a song that is a modern standard of a kind by John Bucchino, Grateful. He obviously knew Joe quite well. Jimmy.
In addition to the sorrow we feel at Joe's loss, there's also deep gratitude for the time we had with him. And this song is about that feeling. I've got a roof over my head. I've got a warm place to sleep. Some nights I lie awake counting gifts instead of counting sheep. I've got a heart that can hold love. I've got a mind that can think. There may be times when I lose the light and let my spirit sink, but I can't stay depressed when I remember how I'm blessed. Grateful, grateful, truly grateful. And duly grateful. In a city of strangers, I've got a family of friends. No matter what rocks or brambles fill the way, I know that they will stay until the end. I feel a hand holding my hand. It's not a hand you can see, but on the road to the promised land, Joe's hand will shepherd me through delight and despair, holding tight and always there. Grateful, grateful, truly grateful I am. Grateful, grateful, truly blessed and duly grateful. Truly blessed and duly grateful. I like I said in the quote of the poet, I like to think of time travel. I'm connecting two people from different eras because I'm seeing something that they have in common, you know, and it makes time disappear. So I hate to tell you, you know, that's not even funny to me. I do comedy, but in terms of these musical things, I actually don't think of it as comedy because I just really like bringing things together that are different. And I was born with a talent for both pop and classical music, so it can be a confusing road for somebody like me in a way. And you know, I played some difficult pieces here that I arranged myself, and
I
damn,
noticed.
I need a little more practice on them. But this began when I was 9, studying with my first strict classical teacher, and I was playing this piece like, you know, one of those baby pieces, and I said to her, Miss Brown, do you know the theme from Exodus? And she says, well, why? I said, well, could I play it for you? And because I'm doing this for her, and then she says, all right. So I'm like. And she was like, back to our piece, please. So, but that's always been a conflict. I could quote all my teachers, the great George Bolette, who was a wonderful person and pianist, but there I am really torn, crazy like everybody is at college, my first or second year. And
this was at IU?
Indiana University. Yeah. And but I, was always telling everybody my problems. I said, I don't know whether to be a classical pianist or a popular pianist. And George didn't make much of a contribution. He said it.
Well, they're different.
So nobody came to you and said, why don't you do both?
Constance Keene was
Is
a
that
practical
right?
woman, and she had done everything from, Naumburg Award, Town Hall debut, to touring with Benny Goodman's orchestra playing Rhapsody in Blue. And when I told her I'd had a gig, even if it was a bar mitzvah, the first thing she'd say is, how much? Because she knew what it was
She always had her priorities straight.
But she knew you had to make a living in music, and she was all for it. And her husband, Abram Chason's the same way. He had the voice like this, and he said, Jimmy, in my heart of hearts, I know
It's
you'll
not
be
low enough. It's more like this.
You'll be a popular pianist. So they made me feel better about it. And the reason I got to them was because of one of those kind of musical comedians. The one my idol at the time was Peter Nero.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Peter. And then what the luck or fate? The man moves to my community on Long Island with his family. And his daughter befriends my little sister, Jody. And the next thing we know, Mrs. Nero's picking her up after a play date. And my mother, bless her, says, would you like to hear my son play piano? That's what a good mother is. I always tell her, thank you. So she comes in, and I played Rhapsody in Blue for her. And she said, I'm no maven, this is the quote, but I think he's talented. I'm going to call Peter's former teacher, Constance Keene. And that's how I got to Constance Keene through the Neros. Mm-hmm. And, one funny story about Peter is that I worshipped everything he played. They were funny. There was comedy there, just like you're saying. But he had a great technique. He won the WQXR Young Musicians Award when he was...
young.
When he was young. And he would do, he'd say, I'm going to play, my left hand is going to play the Beethoven Appassionata Sonata, Opus 57. My right hand is going to play Cole Porter's It's All Right With Me. And my left foot will be tapping out the rhythms of a Tahitian fertility dance. And he went like... Whoa! And when Peter became famous, Constance corralled him to play for a benefit for the Harlem School of the Arts. Leontine Price was the president then, and he was going to be the featured performer. And the story is he called Constance up the day of the event, and she said, "How are the tickets?" He said, "How are the ticket sales going?" She said, "Fantastic. There's not a seat left. Horowitz can't even get in." And Peter says, "He can have my seat." Speaking of Horowitz and Constance, I don't know, do you know?
They were great friends, yeah.
They were great friends. They played bridge. She got me his autograph on an album. Also, once she filled in for Horowitz. Did you know that? At a community concert. This is true.
I didn't know Horowitz did community concerts.
Yeah, I know. Well, it was
what
like
year
that.
Was that?
I guess it was in the 40s or 50s.
40s.
Probably the 40s, yeah.
And it was in Massachusetts, I believe. But she heard from the usher later, Constance, after the concert, that there were two latecomers, two old ladies came, and one of them, while Constance is playing, peeks in and says to her friend, "Edna, Horowitz is a woman." True, I collect these stories.
What a lady. So I want to know, to go back to the musical comics of yore, what did you think of people like Hoffnung?
Oh, yeah.
Or my personal favorite among this crowd, Tom Lehrer?
Right. Still alive.
Right. They don't. Some of them, and maybe in the little movie, tell them about Hoffnung. He did satire.
He did
Wagner,
satire.
Wagner
He did,
stuff.
I think he wrote a concerto for a vacuum cleaner and orchestra. That was the kind of stuff he did. He was a British guy.
Oh, he was British.
Yeah.
And the other one, Tom Lehrer, right?
Well, Tom Lehrer is
Lehrer-
American. I'm sure any of you, if you know anything about musical comedy, know Tom Lehrer. How many of you know Alan Sherman?
Right.
Yeah, all these. Yeah, I mean, Hoffnung is the Victor Borg, the people who utilize their classical backgrounds and presumably the classical background of the audience, because the audience needs to be educated enough to laugh at what they're making fun of.
Right.
And then Tom Lehrer is, I'd say, more political satire, songwriter. And who's the other? And Alan Sherman, not political, but social satire, I guess you could say.
And the best one-liners.
Right, which he probably rehearsed for. But all these people had, cream rose to the top. They're probably mediocre people who didn't get that high, but these people were really good, and they constituted that world of, what do you call it? Non-classical performance, but or lighter entertainment, which is a great thing.
But it's an interesting thing to mention somebody like Victor Borge, who was a highly classically trained pianist,
right?
Who studied with, was it Lamond or
you mean in Europe?
Scholler or something?
Before
one
he
of
came
the
here,
big name classical pianists of past times, and nobody apparently ever asked him about that. They were too busy asking him about his routines with Sahana Rusny and the Hungarian Rhapsody and all the other stuff.
Which Sahana Rusny, a singer?
No,
Oh.
he was a pianist.
Oh.
When they would do this routine of the Hungarian Rhapsody, they'd be running around the piano. Yeah, it was quite a funny routine.
Oh, I'm sure. I think he's brilliant.
Yes, he was, yeah.
I think some of the greatest comedians are like great actors, too. It's part of it. I'm admitting now one of my favorites is Don Rickles. I'm sorry, but he was trained as an actor, and so that was a character he was assuming, and he did it really well. And
now you work with a lot of lyricists. I think 4 or 5 of you here.
Well, 2 of them are here.
Oh, 2 of them are here. Okay. You mentioned somebody who I knew very well who's no longer with us, Kate. Kate Light.
Kate Light. It makes me very sad.
She's a wonderful writer.
She's the one who wrote 100% Wonderful. And she was a very, what do you call it, multi-talented. She was the violinist for the New York City Opera Orchestra.
That's right.
She was an award-winning poet, a serious poet, and she was writing lyrics and shows. And
yeah.
She was
Is that song in print?
No, just maybe a lead sheet that I've written out. But I'd make it available, sure.
But of course, you've written a lyric or 2 in your day, too, haven't you?
I wrote the ones for the Over the Falls one, and I've written my own, starting back. Well, the first one that was recognized was my experience. This dates me of the EST training.
Oh yes.
Oh.
I went, and I wrote about it. It was in a review in the New York Times, so of course I memorized.
Around 1970.
What the guy said, Mr. Roberts wrote a plaintively powerful song about an experience with EST. It went. My life was messed up, so I called EST up to tell them I was feeling incredibly depressed. They said, that's beautiful. We'd love to help you. If you can cough up $300, then we'll do the rest. And so that was my own personal experience, which I thought gave the song an authenticity, because other people made fun of it, but I didn't think they had taken the training like I had. And it concerns a fateful day during one of those upstate blizzards when a busload of cross-dressers going to Toronto hits a van of an extended Amish family coming the other way. Both vehicles are disabled, and the New York State Police bring them both to this old inn called the Big Dipper Inn. And we learn a lot about the owner, her son, the two groups of people, and for the next 3 days, lives are changed.
Sounds like Buffalo, where they used to do all that.
I was saving that to say it was set in Buffalo until we learned that Buffalo people are very thin-skinned about their city. We didn't say anything. We just said it snowed. But we sent it to an artistic director of a theater there, and she said, you know, I just can't take these slurs against my city. And we said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, you have the state police bring the Amish people to the hotel. I mean, we have a perfectly fine metropolitan police department. And here's the killer. She said, and you know, the snow, do you know what city in New York has the most snow? We went, what? Syracuse! It started with discovering Richard Rodgers and Hammerstein, Rodgers and Hart, George Gershwin and his brother Ira, or as his lovely wife Ira, they used to say. And eventually Sondheim. And I guess I don't know if I'm derivative, but most of my earliest reviews always invoked Sondheim. But in a nice way, like I wrote a children's show and they said, Sondheim for beginners. And,
but you could do worse. You could do worse than be associated with that name, you know.
No,
that.
I know, but you know, he dominates. It's just, I miss him so much. So, oh yes, I played for 7 years at the Drake Hotel. I turned a cocktail lounge into a cabaret.
That was worth the trip over there.
Thank you, yes.
What was that, 55th and Park or something
56th and Park, and it was 22 stories, which is so quaint
so short these days in Manhattan.
And it was replaced by the infamous 420 Park Avenue, 90-story, tallest residential building in the Western Hemisphere.
You don't mean the Green Building, do you?
Yes.
Oh, that's 432 Park.
We all say
That's actually the ugliest building in New York.
No. That was the
I'm so glad
Drake.
the Drake Hotel was replaced by
And
that.
Arthur Rubinstein always stayed at the Drake. I went to the green room with a recital, sitting next to a man who had tea with Henry James, practically blind at this point, like 80. It was 1974 or something. And he said, he was so charming. Even then he said, I cannot sign any autographs now. If you want me to sign something, I'll sign anything. I'll sign my life away. Write to me at the Drake Hotel.
But he wasn't living there. He was just staying there.
He would stay when that was his chosen hotel.
Uh-huh.
I played there when it was owned by Swiss Air. Oh. So the Swiss, of course, what are the two things? Chocolates, clocks.
And neutrality.
Right. Well, they had a clock which had 4 times, it was a big clock, you could see the inner workings in the lobby, and I was playing in the lobby bar. Now, I'm just like the Flowers, I'm the bar pianist, but I took it more seriously, as we now know about me. And every 15 minutes, the clock would, I'm doing a ballad, you know, like, every time we say goodbye, I die alive. Somebody showed me a secret switch on the bottom of this huge clock. It was a German on-off switch. It had like aus or ein.
Oh, yeah.
So I would turn it aus for the 4 hours of my gig. But finally, Mr. Giesinger, the general manager, got word that I was doing that, and I saved this message for a long time from him. He said, Jim, it's Giesinger here. You must allow the clock to go ding-dong whenever the hour should arrive. So no more could I turn it off. It was so humiliating.
You have been watching the second of 4 installments of a musical marathon tribute celebrating the life of Joseph Patrych, who founded the Salon Concerts at Clavier House series. I want to thank three gentlemen who were close friends of Joe who put this concert together: John Samuels, Ronn Yedidia, and the Master of Ceremonies, Mark N. Grant. I also thank James Wu for setting up and directing the live stream with assistance from Linya Tso. The Joseph Patrych Memorial was a co-production of New York Piano Academy and Lumineer. These live stream installments are brought to you by Salon Concerts at Clavier House. Salon Concerts at Clavier House relies on donations to keep our weekly in-person and live stream series going throughout the year. So to contribute, please visit salon.clavierhouse.com, and thank you for your generous support. You can learn about the expert piano restoration services that Clavier House offers either by visiting Clavier House during office hours or by going online to clavierhouse.com. This is Jed Distler, Artistic Director for Salon Concerts at Clavier House, and thank you for watching. We will see you next time.